Alright, let's talk about speed. With of the word speed, what do you think of? Speed tells you how fast something is moving. So let's say if a car is traveling at a speed of 30 meters per second. What does that mean? So that means that every second, the car would have traveled a distance of 30 meters. So let's say this is the start line, and I'm using a box to represent a car, and the car is moving in this direction at a speed of 30 meters per second. So 1 second later, the car would have traveled a total distance of 30 meters. 2 seconds later, the car gonna travel another 30 meter of distance. So the total is 60 meters. So we can make a table. So let's put T for time and D for distance. So if the speed is 30 meters per second, so every second, the distance traveled would increase by 30. And so that's what speed tells us. It tells us how fast the distance of an object when the distance traveled by an object is changing every second. So let's say if you're driving a car and you're going 60 miles per hour, every hours at that speed you would travel a distance of 60 miles. So let's say if you want to travel a distance of 300 miles, it's going to take you 5 hours to do so. At the first hours, you're going to travel 60 miles. And the second hours, you will discover a distance of 120 miles. So every hours, you're going to travel an additional distance of 60 miles per hour. Now this is a formula that you need to know. It's D equal to Vt. In this equation, D can be used as distance. V represents the speed and T represents the time. Now sometimes this formula you can use the velocity in terms of speed, and if you do so, distance will no longer technically be represented by distance, but it's going to be represented by displacement. So you can use that simple formula in many different ways. So it's just a question for you. So let's say if you have an object that is moving at a speed of, let's say, 50 meters per second, how long will it take for this object to travel a distance of 1000 meters? So looking for the time, how long? So you can use the formula is D equal to Vt. So distance is 1000. V is 50 meters per second, and T, we need to calculate the time. So we can divide both sides by 50. So you can remove the 50. So you can cancel the 0. So the time is 20 seconds. So it means that it take 20 seconds to travel the distance of 1000 meters. Now let's talk about speed and velocity. So what's the difference between these two qualities? Because they both describe how fast something is moving, there's the difference between them. Speed is a scalar quantity, and velocity is a vector quantity. Speed is always positive, and velocity can be positive or negative. Now recall that a scalar quantity only has magnitude, whereas velocity has magnitude and direction. So can you think of some example that distinguish the speed and velocity? So let's say if a train, I'm gonna be using a box again, is moving at the speed of 45 meters per second. When you take away the arrow, so you don't have any direction, it's simply moving at the speed of 45 meters per second. In this case, this is describe the speed of the train, because I'm telling you how fast it's moving but not where it's going. Now let's say if we have a train moving 30 meters per second going to the west. In this case, this is description of velocity, because not only do you have the magnitude of the vector, which is the speed, but you also have the direction. And so when you combine magnitude and direction, you have vector quantity. And so velocity is basically the speed with direction. With 30 meters per second is tell you the speed, and west tell you the direction. And we combine these two, you have velocity. So let's summarize a few key points. Speed tells you how fast something is moving. Velocity tells you not only how far something is moving, but also tell you where it is going. So remember, velocity is speed with direction. Speed can only be positive. Velocity can be both positive or negative. So if v is negative 20 meters per second, you know that you're dealing with velocity because it's negative. If you're looking for the speed would be positive 20 meters per second. Speed is always positive. And you can say that speed is absolute value of velocity. Velocity can be positive or negative, but speed is always positive. So if the velocity is negative 40 miles per second, the speed is automatically positive 45 per second. Now there are some mathematical formula that you want to know when dealing with speed and velocity. This is something called average speed. Because sometimes in physics, you need to calculate the average speed of an object. The average speed can be calculated by total distance traveled by the objects and divided by total time. Now, if you think about this formula, d is equal to vt, t can be described by the speed or velocity. So if you divide both sides by t, you can cancel on the right side. You can see that v is equal to d over t. So average speed v is equal to d divided by t. Now what about average velocity? Let's say if we want to calculate the average velocity, how can we do so? Average velocity is equal to distance or displacement divided by the total time. So in this case, the formula looks the same. Average velocity can be represented by v, displacement can be represented by d, and the time is t. So the formula looks identical, but the meaning is absolutely different. So keep this in mind. Velocity is associated with displacement. Speed is associated with distance. Now let's say if you have an object and this object travels 12 meters east, and then it travels 20 meters west, and it did so in a time of period or total time period of 4 seconds. So let's say going from position A to position B, that's the distance of 12 meters, and from position B to position C, 20 meters. So that's total trips from A to C. It took only 4 seconds. So for this object going from A to C, what is the average speed and what's the average velocity of the object? So to calculate the average speed, we need to determine the total distance and divide by the total time. The total distance is simply 12 plus 20. If you add those numbers, it will give you 32 meters. And the total time is 4 seconds. So 32 divided by 4 is equal to 8. So the average speed is positive 8 meters per second. Keep in mind that average speed is always positive. So what about the average velocity? Well, we know that average velocity is to find the displacement divided by the total time. The displacement for the first part of the trip going from A to B is positive 12 because the object is traveling in the positive x direction. It's going to the east. For the second part of the trip, the object is traveling to the west, so it's a negative 20 meter. So if we add up 12 and then negative 20, we can get the displacement which is negative 8 meter. Now keep in mind that we can also do this as number line. Let's say A is at position 0, B is at position 12. And if we do 12 minus 20, you can see that C is at position 8. And the difference between these two positions will be the negative 8, and that's the displacement. So the final position minus 8 plus 0 is displacement. Now let's divide by 4 seconds. So the average velocity is negative 2 meters per second. It makes sense because the net result that the person traveled in the west or east direction toward the negative x-axis. So going from A to C, the person is traveling to the x negative direction, as that's the west. And that's why the velocity is negative, because anytime you're going to the negative x-axis, it's always going to become negative. And if you're going to the east, it's going to become a positive